Thank you, Mr. Umang Vora, for being part of this panel discussion with us today. It's an immense pleasure to have you on board with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Savita. Thank you for having me.
Great. To just set a context in terms of what we're doing today, efforts to develop a silver bullet, which is a vaccine, and repurposing the existing drugs in the COVID times has always made frontline news. However, less prominent is the information about the seismic impact that COVID has created in the regular day-to-day operations of a pharma industry. And with so much time and effort which is being spent in the COVID and so much resources being allocated, every aspect of the pharma value chain, starting from the R&D to the distribution and marketing, having to adapt. And as all of us believe, there is always going to be a pre-COVID and a post-COVID era once we all come out of this, and it's going to be strongly etched in our memories for times to come. What are the trends and practices that are here to stay in the post-COVID normal is what we want to hear from you today, Mr. Vora, followed by a couple of other panelists that we're going to see during the course of the day. So please tell us, Mr. Umang, before we go into the specifics of each stage in the value chain and how it has really impacted you and how it will come out more stronger than ever before, can you give us the brief about when you think of a post-COVID normal, what are the few things that comes to your mind?
So I think we see, Savita, a great set of questions. We see 2 or 3 big trends that are going to probably shift and stay. The first trend, I think we see a huge trend of illness moving to wellness, right? I think this is a time where, and I'd like to start always first with the patient because that's why we exist as a company. But the supernormal move of illness to wellness means that everyone is going to be tracking their own health. Everyone's going to be curious about what they're eating, how they're breathing, where they're living, right? And everyone's going to be extremely particular about their near and dear and their family. So I think this is the Uber trend that we see coming out of COVID. People are going to take health in their own hands. They're going to track it more real time. They're going to be very conscious of medicines they eat, food they eat, sanitizers they use, where they travel, where they work, right? So I think this is the biggest trend, and it's not just pharma. I think it's more demographic. I could clearly see conversations post-COVID with people you're trying to employ in your organization, and they're probably going to be telling you, we're more comfortable staying here and commuting maybe once a quarter, once a month. Right. And I think as corporate leaders, if we want the best talent in our organizations, we have to be ready for that sort of a move. So I see that as one big trend that's going to happen, patients worldwide. I see a huge merging, and this was there for us available before COVID, right? But COVID's really accelerated it. I see a huge merging of technology into our lives. I see, I can visualize the fact that every one of our operations in business will be perhaps technology, even more technology embracing than it was before. So I can clearly see if our technology quotient today, for example, on a scale of 0 to 10 was 3 or 4, I can see that becoming 7. So this could impact the way we build automation into our facilities. This could impact the way we speak to doctors, the way doctors speak to patients. Right, it could impact how we work. Right, I clearly see the office of tomorrow becoming a collaboration center, as against being the regular office that we were all used to. So I see huge changes in just the way that technology will come into our business operations. I think that the world is going to have a rethink and a relook at the way that they discover drugs. I think the computational power of what is available. I think the ability to use sensors, the ability to get more real-time data, and the movement of science into being more predictive in terms of patient outcomes is going to make a huge difference in the way we discover. We spoke about automation in manufacturing, and we spoke about our go-to-market, which is our doctors and our patients. So I see huge changes across the world post-COVID.
Great. I think very quite pertinent points that you just brought out, Mr. Umang. Illness to wellness. So let's probably start from that, where you mentioned a very important point. Industry, the whole patient mindset. There's a paradigm shift, especially in a country like India, where we weren't really giving as much focus on health and preventive health. More importantly, what do you think is the impact on the pharmaceutical industry as the patients are moving from illness to wellness? So what do you see there? And what is the role that pharma has to be able to move with that shift?
Yeah, I think the biggest move for pharma is to reimagine their own role in a patient's life. Right? And typically pharma has been associated with this, someone falling sick, you provide a medicine, they become better, right? And today I think the whole pharma universe is changing. I think the universe is about staying with the patient when they are well and then treating them when they are ill, right? So we've always tried to do it the reverse way, which is the patient needs us most when they're unwell. I think today the patient needs us most when they're well, right? Because nobody wants to feel unwell. So this means that we juggle our portfolios around, that we're supporting people with knowledge. We're reaching out directly to them in some form that is legally permissible across the world, right? B, these people are tracking their data and we're helping them do that on a day-to-day basis. What's their blood pressure? What's their blood sugar, right? How are they feeling on a day-to-day basis with the recent medicines for arthritis that they've taken, right? And in the case of the lung, which was the most affected with COVID, right? What is their breathing pattern? What is their flow rate, right? What is everything else how does pollution affect their breathing? So it's interesting that we're going to combine this phase of data, right, along with the medication, along with the tracking of the patient. And finally, when they're unwell, they will be well prepared to know, those points where they become unwell, right? So asthmatics know when they get an attack. But what we are trying to do is asthmatics could know 7 days or 5 days before, based on a set of factors, based on a set of data, based on science, right? That they are likely to get an attack in the next 5 days or 7 days. That's where we want to go. We want to prevent, right? So move the whole thing from illness to wellness, and we want them to be better prepared. So we're playing a large role in their lives much before the disease actually occurs, right? And I think that's the role that pharma companies have to reimagine. And I think we also have to reimagine just the way we speak to consumers and patients. I think that's going to go through a big change as well.
Great point there, Mr. Umang. Really moving towards a patient-centric approach. While it was done, maybe not as much as we would wanted it to be, but with this shift happening from illness to wellness, staying closer to the patients at the time of wellness ever before is going to be important. And some of the tools you mentioned, be it knowledge sharing, be it really kind of staying closer to them and throughout the value chain, if they have started treatment, completed treatment, preventive health, all of that. So great points addressed there. Quickly, we'll move on to some of the elements in the value chain. So you touched upon technology as a second point, where you said it has to move across all facets of the operations of the pharma industry. So do you see a role in technology for R&D, for instance, where increasingly R&D and clinical trials, for instance, where recruiting patients, monitoring patients, all of that has taken an impact. So do you see technology playing a role, and have you at Cipla thought or planned for any kind of a tech adoption there?
Yes, I see a huge role because this is the part of the value chain that pretty much determines companies' existence and their progress. So I think there are three broad trends. We spoke about this a little earlier, and there are three broad trends, Savita, that I think are important. The first is the computational power that is available today in systems that we use, right? So and at some level people call it quantum computing. At the other time, people are using this as elements that can go on to artificial-based machine learning techniques as well. So I look at a huge increase in computational power. I look at a huge improvement from predictive science. Today, we can see from based on softwares how a particular medicine moves into your lung, right, or any other organ of the body. When does it get metabolized? When does it get excreted, right? And how long does it stay there? And what happens when it moves in? There's enough amounts of radio imaging, etc., that's available to be able to tell you that. So I see the second predictive ability of science, and the third, as you said, is on real-time tracking. right? So now a patient had to come to a clinical center to get tracked. His vitals were tracked at that point in time. Now you can have everything just done on your phone, right? That's it. So you have these three: wide availability of computational power, the ability of predictive science, and the real-time tracking. And I think this is going to make a huge difference to accelerate, reduce the cost for and accelerate drug discovery and research. And at Cipla, we've looked at ways in which predictive science could reduce the number of patients we need for our clinical trials. We've looked at the ability of data analytics to tell us where and what types of patients, right, would be perhaps the best suited for a new investigational drug that we're trying to come out with. So it accelerates your path to market, it reduces your costs, and finally gets medicines to patients sooner than before.
I think this is something in terms of the opportunity that COVID has probably more out of necessity created. If we are able as an industry able to bring this to the R&D, which can drop cost and accelerate the whole process, that's a single bullet that we have there, Mr. Umang.
Yes,
thank you
absolutely.
for that. So moving on to your thoughts on supply chain. So there's a lot of debate out there today, with respect to supply chain and global aspect of the global supply chain. So what are your views on that? So still now it has all been about low cost, landed cost, and suddenly the argument has changed about the risk in a global supply chain, APIs coming from China, the political risk, etc. So what are your views on that, Mr. Umang?
Yeah. Well, I think that let's go back to the 30,000 broad trend that's happening in the industry, right? So we spoke a little earlier about innovation happening closer to the patient, right? And so the supply chain response to that is also manufacturing happening closer to where the patient is, right? Now, what has affected this is geopolitical views about about where the world is headed, right? And so at some points people say, China, we need to buy medicines from China, localize them. But I'm also looking at this as an opportunity, let's say, for the US. And I'm saying maybe the US, where we have a few plants, needs to localize a lot more. It's the largest market in the world, right? So I think in China, we're building a facility for China, right? So these are big markets. So I think what's come out of COVID is that some of these chains, right, the earlier wave of globalization, located factories one place, servicing patients somewhere else, right? And with the pace of innovation that's happening, I think the supply chain needs to keep up with that as well. So I would expect a large portion of supplies to move closer to markets which are big and deep, right? So US will have its facilities which are more localized. China is going to have facilities which are more localized for its own domestic market. And so will India. India will have facilities, because we're talking just between these three countries, we're talking about 50% of the world population. Right. So I think we are going to see those trends emerging. I certainly think the way people are looking at supply chain is not necessarily anti-China or a risk from China, right? Because to be honest, throughout the crisis, I think we've got the most reliability other than the first 3 months of supplies coming from China, because right now they're the least affected country in the world. Right. So I think the bigger trend here is really about owning your own supply chain. Right. It's about owning end to end your control on your same supply chain. So, for example, I don't think de-risking means that you would necessarily bring a material from China and house it close to my manufacturing site in India. I think that risks it more, because tomorrow, if there was to be an event at that site, I risk my supply chain even more if I put everything around it, right? So de-risking is a fundamental of several things about communities. It's a fundamental of sources of supply. But I think that is a realization is very high right now across the chain. So I see a lot of localization. I see people becoming more local with their manufacturing. And I see people wanting to control large chains of value across the supply chain.
So a very interesting point about patient-centric supply chain, which you mentioned, Mr. Umang, and you also mentioned that de-risking is important, and hence having that network, optimizing the network to ensure that we minimize risk is also important. So when you said patient-centric supply chain, are you looking at any component of the supply chain moving closer to the patient? So did you have any views around that?
Yes. And I see a large portion of the supply chains moving closer to the patients. I think there would be certain categories. Look at it 10 years from now, right? We're talking about personalized medicine, What is personalized medicine? Personalized medicine basically means that you're going to be looking at certain types of medications that work in certain populations, right? These populations are not going to be uniform across the world. They will be scattered, right? So the broader trend is for supply to move where innovation is happening closer to patients. So, but this is a 10-year effect. Right now, I do think, and at Cipla we're doing this as well, which is we're trying to move manufacturing closer to the big markets. So in the US, where we already manufacture 40-50% of our supply, right? We're trying to localize a lot more. In India, which is the largest market, we're trying to bring back APIs that we used to have in China, bring them back for our India market, right? So a lot of these are already in play.
Thank you so much, Mr. Umang, for sharing your valuable insights across the trends and what you really see and what you envisage going forward in the new era. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Savita. Thank you very much. Good to chat with you. Bye-bye. Good luck with your program.